Sudan has banned the country's main opposition party after a week of fighting with armed rebels in two Sudanese states. With accusations of airstrikes on civilians and thousands now fleeing their homes, is Sudan heading for another Darfur tragedy? And after the separation of the south, can the government stop the country fragmenting even further? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Felicity Barr. So the Sudanese government no longer recognises the northern branch of the country's largest opposition party, the Sudan People's Liberation Movement, that is known as the SPLM North. Khartoum says the group is not a legally registered political party after the south gained independence. President Omar al-Bashir has also declared a state of emergency in the state of Blue Nile and removed its elected governor, who is the leader of the SPLM North. Khartoum blames the South and the SPLM for violence in the Blue Nile and South Kordofan states, as well as other areas along the boundary. The recent fighting has killed dozens and driven thousands from their homes. Imran Khan has more.
Life was already tough here in the Blue Nile state on the border with South Sudan. This camp's just one of many that dot that border. And now the Sudanese president, Omar al-Bashir, has declared a state of emergency here in the border areas with South Sudan after its army clashed with forces loyal to the Blue Nile state's elected governor. Bashir has appointed a military commander to take over the state. The government of Sudan blames the fighting on armed groups linked to the south.
What's going on now is not far from the work of Sudan People's Liberation Army or its remnants. And even American officials expressed concern of South Sudan's support for rebel groups in South Kordofan. And that's similar to what's happening in the Blue Nile state. We declared from July 9th that we'll have good neighborly relations with South Sudan, and we're prepared to support its stability in a region that desperately needs development as it faces one of the worst droughts.
But even natural disaster has not stopped the fighting. In South Kordofan, which also borders South Sudan, fighting has raged for months and hundreds of thousands have fled. South Sudan rejects the charge that they're behind the violence.
The clashes is because the Republic of the Sudan, the National Congress Party, has refused to implement the terms of the comprehensive peace agreement that they have signed. And I think that is very unfortunate. We are all committed to a peaceful resolutions of all our conflicts, including the two areas.
The UN's worried. Ban Ki-moon issued a statement saying the Secretary General is deeply concerned about the deterioration of the security situation. He went on to say the Secretary General urges the parties to immediately cease all hostilities. But given months of clashes and now the state of emergency, his words may well fall on deaf ears. Imran Khan, Al Jazeera.
All right, so plenty to talk about. Let's now introduce our panel of guests. Joining us first from Khartoum is Rabi Abdul Ati. He's a senior member of the National Congress Party and an advisor to the Ministry of Information. In Juba, William Hayzaza, lecturer in communications at the University of Juba. And over in Dubai, we have Hamdi Abdul Rahman, a professor of political science at Cairo University and also Zayed University. Gentlemen, thanks very much indeed for being with us. If I can start in Khartoum and speak to Rabi Abdul Ati, why has the Sudanese government banned the SPLM North from being a political party in your country? That is obviously creating much anger and tension.
Yes, actually the SPLM northern sector is not legalized according to the Political Parties Act. And the government so many times, numbers of times, asked those people to legalize themselves and to register this political party according to the Political Parties Act, but they didn't do so. Therefore, our government is not recognized all the activities by this group, and we are not now acknowledging this political party as SPLM Northern Sector, and therefore I think that the government will ban all the activities and all the people who are supporting Malik Agar, who is violating the rules and violating the constitution of our country.
So, William Hayzaza, it's all down to bureaucracy. The SPLM North didn't register themselves and that's why they can't operate.
Yeah, I've just listened to the argument raised, and I would like to add that to elucidate the issue. The government in Khartoum believes in political Islam, and as such, they take conflict and disaster theory as a very paramount basis of their interactions. So as such, if you see even the Southern Kordofan and Southern Blue Nile agreements, which were reached recently in Addis Ababa, when it was taken to Khartoum, President Bashir gave it a low tone. And secondly, when the Ethiopian troops were affected by landmines, even to evacuate them for treatment, government delayed until the soldiers died. So this was a key event after as regards to the agreement on the two areas. Secondly, Khartoum declared a ceasefire, and now just to open a new front line in Blue Nile during the holy Ramadan feast, and then suddenly arrested the SPLM leaders, and then dismissed the elected governor. These were actually, for people to understand who are outside, it's difficult to perceive why government is acting like this.
Right.
Simply because the government is applying political Islam, which believes in disaster theory, that they must destabilize the areas around them and then to subdue them by use of force.
OK, we're going to talk a lot further about Blue Nile and South Kordofan a little later in the programme. But first of all, I want to go over to Dubai now and speak to Hamdi Abdul Rahman. Why do you think Khartoum has decided to go the route of banning the SPLM North? What's in it for them?
We have to go through the real causes and the root causes in order to understand the recent development, not only in the Blue Nile states, but in South Kordofan and Abyei. I think these areas, at the borderline, the communities, are the most marginalized people, and they were deprived during the long civil war in Sudan. And there is a fear in the north that all marginalized people in this area will unite together and have a kind of a united coalition against the government in Khartoum. This is number one. Number two, there is a growing political, I'm not saying military influence of the SPLM in the north. You have an elected governor in the Blue Nile, who has been released by the president, and the main opposition in the south of Kordofan, headed by Abdelaziz El-Helou, are mainly from the SPLM. So I think there is a fear from the government of Khartoum that there is a growing influence among these communities, the border community. Number three, I think it has to do with the CBA in 2005. It was not completed yet. Some people think that with the independence of South Sudan that the final stage of the CBA is completed. But I think the two areas beside Abyei were promised a special status in South Kordofan and in the Blue Nile. They were promised with popular consultancy. Consultation didn't happen. So I think there is a big dispute among this area and the government in Khartoum regarding the final status and the relation, the nature of the relation between these two areas and the government in Khartoum. If we have all these together, we could understand why the government in Khartoum went beyond the negotiated solution and even sacked the peace broker, I mean the elected governor of the Blue Nile, who is Malik Agar,
right,
who used to broker in the conflict in South Kordofan.
Well, I think we all agree it's a terribly complex issue. And before we delve deeper into the issues, let's just give you a bit more background to what is happening on that key border area. Now, when a peace deal was signed in 2005 to pave the way for the South's independence, the SPLM and Khartoum did agree that Blue Nile and South Kordofan would have, quote, popular consultations about their future. But this, as we've just heard, never really happened, leading to an increase in tension and, of course, now violence. Well, this map shows the new areas of fighting. Firstly, in the state of Blue Nile, where the UN says up to 20,000 people have now fled across the border into Ethiopia. And also in South Kordofan, where Amnesty International says airstrikes by government forces have killed at least 26 civilians. Both states, of course, just north of Sudan's new international border. Well, opposition groups accuse Khartoum of ethnic cleansing and failing to give them a fair share of the national wealth. And many observers have warned Khartoum that taking on the rebels in these areas, including Darfur, could encourage them to coordinate their efforts and drag the country into an all-out war. Let's go back to Khartoum, talk to Rabbi Abdul Atal. Do you think Khartoum is prepared for another all-out war?
I don't think so, because what is now running in Southern Kordofan and Blue Nile is a domestic issue, and the elected governor now is violating the rules and violating the constitution, and the government responsibility is to bring security and stability to the region and to protect civilians. And we should know that this attack started by the rebels led by Malik Agar, and the responsibility of the government is to bring each and everything to its order. Therefore, I don't think that this problem is now out of control, because now our armed forces control the whole region, and the all internal displaced people now, they return to their homes, and
but they haven't, have they? They haven't.
Life.
The UN has said that 20,000 people have now fled across the border into Ethiopia. They fled the Blue Nile state.
This is definitely when this attack started, before 2 days. But now, according to the information which we have, that 90% or more than 90% of the region is now, according to this information, is now stable, and the security now is all over the region except only Kurmuk, and our now armed forces now is marching towards Kurmuk, which is in the border between Ethiopia and Sudan. And I don't think that this is something which can be internationalized. It is a domestic issue, and the Malik Agar, who is leading now this movement of violating the constitution and the endorsed law by our National Assembly, is now actually considered as out of law, and our government is responsible to do its duty to bring stability and security for the people.
OK, William Hay Zaza in Juba, this is all about the south, isn't it, meddling in the north, and that is what is stoking the tensions.
Yeah, I would like to go back to what I stated before. You know, the Addis Ababa Accord on the Blue Nile and the Southern Kordofan, the CPA, and all those kind of popular consultations are agreements which, for Khartoum, their interpretation in terms of restructuring of effective relationship is just a temporary measure. For them, the ultimate goal is to generate conflicts and to destabilize these areas and to subdue them. Once they are not seeing this coming forward, then they resort to use of force to accelerate the process. That's exactly what happened in southern Blue Nile. They just on the eve, on the eat, when they attack, bombed the house of the governor, and this is unacceptable. And you can only understand it from the phenomenon that Khartoum is banned on political Islam, which is contrary to peaceful coexistence of people who are multi-ethnic, multicultural people in the Sudan.
Hamdi Abdul Rahman, if I can come to you now, was it inevitable, do you think, that there would be trouble in these border states once the South had separated?
The conventional wisdom say that the war is costly for both sides, in the north and the south. You know, in the north, they are suffering from the inflation and the reducing of their revenue because of oil going to the south. And they have this international debt reaching more than $38 billion, and they cannot pay the service, not to say the repay the debt itself. So by this, we could say it is looking at war in this area is not rational. But what is going on the ground, there is a real threat of fragmentation of the north, of the balkanization of the north. You have two troubled areas with military clashes, and now the escalation with United Nations reports in the last months saying that there are a lot of military deployment in the areas. So there is, a kind of real threat. So if we could see the troubled area in Darfur and the border area, the Sudanese army already, seized the contested border area in Abyei in May, and now we have this kind of troubles. I could say there is a fear of internationalization of the local issues in Sudan, and we have, taken with our consideration what is going on in the whole region, in North Africa, in Egypt, and in Libya, that there is a redesign of the geostrategy of the region of East Africa. So I'm afraid that the international community will come in, and all these issues, if we are going far from the negotiated settlement in these borderline communities, there is, yes, a real threat of fragmentation of the north.
Right.
And
I want to talk a little bit more about... I'm sorry, do carry on.
If you could just let me, there is now an example for the deprived and marginalized people that the new south in the south of Sudan has been realized. So it became a model for them. So the people in the north, were in this troubled area, and in Darfur and East Sudan, maybe take the example and looking forward for a new North Sudan, which is secular and more democratic. And I think this will attract many international parties to come in and intervene in the north.
Do you admit, William Hayzaza, that the South does have troops operating in the north, and that is causing severe problems, isn't it? The fact that southern troops are backing rebel fighters in the north.
Yeah, I would like to thank you for these two questions. I will clarify it on two issues. One is the threat. The government of the Republic of South Sudan is never backing the rebels in Southern Kordofan or Blue Nile. This allegation is just the assumption of Khartoum, because they are, as I stated before, they would like to destabilize Southern Kordofan, and they would like to destabilize Blue Nile area. And so there is no threat from the government of South Sudan, because South Sudan would like to live peacefully with the Republic of Sudan, and we would like to trade with them, because they stand to benefit from us and we stand to benefit from them.
Sure, but you're
That's
sending...
very clear.
But South Sudan is sending troops, you admit, freely sending troops into the north to back rebel fighters that are fighting the Sudanese government. Sudanese government is going to respond to that, isn't it?
Yeah, the government of South Sudan has never backed those rebels. What is people are trying to confuse is that during the struggle, all of them fought against the government in Khartoum. And the people in Blue Nile and Southern Kordofan are northerners, they are not southerners. And therefore they have their right within that territory where they are to struggle for their rights from the government in Khartoum. But Khartoum is always trying to associate their struggle with the government in the Republic of South Sudan. This is not correct. It is their own right to struggle for it. And so to associate it as a threat from the government of South Sudan is not correct. or two, to consider it as internationalizing the issue. I think government Khartoum has failed to understand that we are in the era of globalization.
All right, well, let's put that point to Hamdi Abdul Rahman, because he was talking about international intervention a little bit earlier. Fighters in Darfur, in fact, have appealed to the international community to impose some sort of no-fly zone over Darfur, over South Kordofan, over the Blue Nile state, because of the airstrikes that the Sudanese government has been carrying out. The fighters are asking for international intervention.
You know, I could say that there is a golden chance in front of the government in Khartoum to manage this transitional period after the separation of the South, and to get benefit from the Arab Spring in the north, in Egypt and Tunisia, and to have a kind of a real and genuine democratic transformation in the north, rather than using the military response to crush any opposition, especially in Darfur or in the troubled area in the border community. Hello?
Yes, I'm still here, Hamdi. I'm just wondering what you think about the fact that the international community should have anticipated what was happening earlier on and perhaps applied pressure to both sides, or is it pressure that's simply not going to work with either the South or the North?
You know that the international intervention already in Darfur, and now there is rising calls to intervene in these hot areas in Blue Nile and in South Kordofan. And there is already a kind of regional intervention in the case of Abyei, that both parties agreed to have an Ethiopian, peace mission in Abyei. So I think the situation now is going to attract more international intervention in North Sudan.
Rabi Abdul Ati in Khartoum, why aren't the humanitarian teams from the international community being allowed free access to the people who are suffering both in Blue Nile and in South Kordofan states?
Yes, before answering this question, I want to correct some information that already said or reported by Hamdi Abdul Rahman. He mixed Mr. Hamdi between Abyei and Southern Kordofan and Blue Nile. Actually, in Abyei, there is no intervention. These Ethiopian forces came for peacekeeping in Abyei till there is a referendum to be conducted according to a comprehensive peace agreement for all Abyei people to decide whether to be a part of the North or a part of the South, or in case of no referendum, actually SPLM and the National Congress Party should agree upon something so as to be implemented on the ground. This is Abyei. There is no connection between Abyei and Southern Kordofan and Blue Nile. In Blue Nile and Southern Kordofan, there should be a popular consultation, and a popular consultation is not to be controlled by the governor. This is for the people to say their opinions.
I think
views
you've made the point, sir, but
yes.
I'd still like to know why it is that humanitarian groups aren't being allowed unrestricted access to the people who desperately need the help.
Yes, humanitarian, I think that we have here some volunteers and some organizations of Sudan, and they are capable to do and to provide all internal displaced by the aid and by their needs. And I don't think that we are in need of foreign organizations to come so as to
the United
serve
Nations
their own
completely
agenda,
disagrees with you, sir. They want to be able to go in, they want unrestricted access, and they want to be able to reach these people, and they're having to operate under the supervision of the Sudanese government.
Yes, actually, our president before expelled about more than 13 foreign organizations coming to provide aid. But
why?
Unfortunately, they didn't provide aid, but they are only working to get information and to work as spies and to serve their own agenda. Therefore, I think that we are capable as Sudan government to provide aid for internal displaced. And now our authority, the Sudan Armed Forces, the security and the Sudanese organizations is submitting and providing aid for all internally displaced people. And I don't think that whenever we come to conclusion that some foreign organizations are providing real aid, we will not hesitate to give them licenses to provide such aid.
All right, gentlemen, as ever, we are out of time, so I must thank our guest in Khartoum, Rabi Abdul Ati. In Juba, we have William Hay Zaza, and of course in Dubai, Hamdi Abdul Rahman. And thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. As ever, we welcome your comments and suggestions, so please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. But from me, Felicity Barr, it's goodbye.